Please get comfortable. I've got 7 single-space type pages to get through. In fact, over the years since I've left here, my vision has dimmed. Definitely on the internet, the printer is printing much smaller than what it used to. Before I launch into the sermon, I've got something weighing on my mind, something that's been pressing on my mind almost a year now. How many in this congregation traveled on a train from Paris to Berlin about a year ago? Raise your hands. Anybody behind me? There better be. We need to pray, ladies and gentlemen. Wasn't that a journey? We were in a sleeping compartment. If you thought Via was bad, try the slow night train over in Europe. I had better accommodations when I was down at Camp Aldershot in 1960 in the old H huts. And you know how they tiered us in the double bunks that were ubiquitous in those days in every army camp. Not many ministers can say they shared a night with 6 others in a small compartment, 3-tiered, 1, 2, and 3, on each side of an aisle about the width of this part of the pulpit. And some are here today. Oh, what I could say. Now let me get into the sermon. I got that off my chest. From John, the letter of John, that is. Here again these words. If anyone has material possessions and sees his brother in need but has no pity on him, how can the love of God be in him? Those who obey his commands live in him, and he in them. And this is how we know he lives in us. We know it by the Spirit he gives us. As I read through today's appointed lesson to be read on this particular Sunday, it set my mind to thinking. Those thoughts took me into a review mentally of my roots, but also equally our roots. Those of us who were raised in the Maritimes, and especially here in Nova Scotia. And when you take a look at the history that is Nova Scotia's and the diversity of cultures that are found within its bounds, you ought to feel a sense of pride. Careful, though, pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. So exercise a little caution on that, but rightfully, you have a right to be proud. One of the things Nova Scotia is known for is its black communities. And in more recent years, very positive celebrations of their history and culture have taken place. But this was not always so, and I'm old enough to give testimony to that. But nevertheless, we have come a long way. After 2 world wars, black and white and red and every other color for that matter, in great moments of extremities, in tough times, have found a collective bond that transcended race and religion. When you are in extremity, color is no longer important, but fellowship, comradeship, and love is. One of the great black people that is perhaps little known but did appear in today's newspaper, the Chronicle Herald, talks about a Victoria Cross winner, one of the earliest, certainly the first Canadian, William Hall. If you read the newspaper this morning, you will know that he is the first black person to receive the Victoria Cross. And where did he come from? Well, he came from Bluffs Road. Who here knows where that is? One person. It's near Hantsport is the simple answer to that question. About 10 kilometers away, so the notes told me when I read it up. He came from there, 1857, the siege of Lucknow. And if you want all the details of that, read this morning's paper. And you can always get that. If you don't get the Chronicle Herald, just go to the internet. A few years ago, not many, I was the chaplain appointed, or invited rather, to dedicate the General Dynamics building in Cole Harbor, which is located on native land. And Chief Ahenakew was the chief who was there and represented all of the natives of this part of Nova Scotia. After the dedication and after the comments, he and I shared a lot of time together. We had transcended race. I was white, and he was so-called red, although I'm not quite sure where the red comes from or why they are called that, but for better words, a native of Nova Scotia, he and I shared in great conversation, delightedly to the exclusion of the then premier of the day. For we were caught up as comrades, people who had worn the uniform of our country. He in a far greater way than I, for he was a World War II vet, I believe, or if not World War II, certainly the Korean conflict then, and had the medals to prove it. The bounds that we shared of service in uniform to our country, and also that we shared, as we discovered in conversation, we shared bonds of spirituality. Nova Scotia culture is intertwined with considerable Celtic influence too. My wife is a Scots Presbyterian, and she made me say this part. But you're Nova Scotians, surely you know about Pictou and the Hector, the good ship Hector. In recent celebrations, the ship Hector has been paramount in remembering the Celtic lore. And the revival of Celtic music, as well as Irish Celtic traditions, has helped to establish Nova Scotia as a place known for its music in a very unique and special way. And that's part of the culture that we treasure. So if you're of Celtic background, be proud. Although careful, pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. I may have mentioned that before. Or if you're Acadian French, Nova Scotia has long had a hidden treasure of that culture, but it is now celebrated as a key cultural component of the life and witness of people of Nova Scotia. Today, and by today, the last few years, the Nova Scotia International Tattoo invariably provides a venue where the young, beautiful Acadian dancers reflect the Acadian culture through dance and song during the tattoo. Remember, the end of June and into July is the tattoo. Just a quiet little plug. And if they tell me this is going on the internet, I hope it doesn't get viral. Then if you're from away, as we used to say, come on down to Nova Scotia. The tattoo is a wonderful thing to attend. And the English, how could I forget the English? Do they have a culture? Well, let me tell you. You know I'm going to. Back in the olden times, after the English, remember Cornwallis, not quite as bad as he might be portrayed more recently, after he had taken over Fort Beausejour and surrounding lands, with the need to counter the French presence of that era, decided to arrange settlements here, and hence the Yorkshire immigration that populated Westmoreland County in New Brunswick, and of course Cumberland County in Nova Scotia, my roots. And if you have the Hector for the Scots, why we have the good ship Albion for the English, hence Albion Street in Amherst, a tribute to the Yorkshire emigration. Will our bird, here stays good Yorkshire, an old book, but delightful reading. Well, we are proud of the diversity of our land, of our space. But there is a catch. And here's how I see it as a catch. Where are the ultimate values? Where are those things that transcend culture, race, religion? Where are those things that bind us together no matter what our cultural background is? What happens when one group sees all others as something less than of value? History abounds with cultural abuse of other cultures. The concentration camps of World War II in occupied Europe are but an example of many cultural abuses that have not ceased to exist in one form or another in the world in which we live. We need, therefore, something larger, something that transcends. So let me arrive at that thing that transcends by sharing with you an old Chinese proverb. It tells the story of a fox that was captured by a tiger. Ever had to stare down a tiger? I haven't, nor do I wish to. But this poor fox had to. The fox said, "You can't eat with me because the gods have made me the leader of all the animals." Now you know, hence the name Sly Fox. The tiger did not believe this, but the fox said very quickly, for his life depended upon it, "Follow me and see if any animal challenges me." Tiger, perhaps out of curiosity, agreed and followed the fox directly behind him as they traveled throughout the forest. And to the tiger's amazement, what the fox said turned out to be true. Not a single animal they encountered challenged the fox. In fact, they fled away in terror, sheer panic. After several such encounters, the tiger finally agreed that the fox was the leader of all the animals and let him go. Well, the Chinese proverb teaches us that it is easy to remove obstacles that oppose us when we have a tiger lurking behind us. Transcend that particular materialistic metaphor, if you will, into the sacred, the spiritual. Both the tiger and the fox operate on the basis of stealth and wily, creative thinking. The spin and politicians come to mind. Do we have any politicians with us today? I was thought Matt might be here and I could speak to him about sin. Well, don't let me pick on a select group that we all love to hate, so to speak. But we need something that transcends culture, race, and even religion. We need a vision of something better. The epistles, and especially the letters, if you will, the better name for it, the letters of John, reflect plain, practical Christian living. And the message embedded in the life and words of Jesus is the heart and soul and fabric of those 3 letters that John wrote. It is a gift of love. Love by its very nature transcends. The Englishman can marry the Scot. The Chinese can marry the English, and so on. The unity is in the love of Christ, reflected in sharing that love with each other. John's letter writing earlier refers to Cain and Abel. Cain's jealousy led to his murdering of his brother Abel. This terrible story is remembered by the writer of John's letters, and especially by the early church, essentially saying the opposite of love for one's brother is hatred, leading to murder. All-powerful, all self-seeking, all self-glorifying, despises the way of life that prioritizes the needs of others ahead of one's own needs. This is the way of Jesus. To love and to do good, to act justly, to love God with all one's heart and soul and mind. There is a story of another Victoria Cross winner, Andy Mynarski. Andy Mynarski was served in World War II with the RCAF as an upper gunner in Lancasters. And he had a friend, Joe Murphy, who happened to be a tail gunner. And Joe had been promoted to an officer while Andy Mynarski was one of the senior NCOs. So whenever they went out, as they came back to camp to spend the night, Andy would salute his brother officer in a somewhat mocking fashion. On the last night, while serving in a Lancaster overseas, their plane was hit by gunfire from a German aircraft, and the plane was going to go down. Mynarski, the mid-upper gunner, made his way back to the escape hatch and was about to jump down through the hole when he noticed the tail gunner was jammed in the tail. And there was no possibility of his getting out. And there was a fire between the opening where Andy could seek his life, if you will. So he grabbed the fire axe, climbed through, if you know Lancaster's very tight space, to the turret, the rear turret, and tried to bang through it, but was unable. In the meantime, all of his lower body, his clothing and so on, were on fire. And Joe Murphy, his comrade in arms, told him, get out while you can. And then the last thing, after crawling backwards, keeping his eyes focused on Joe, his comrade, he gave that knightly salute and then dropped through. As strange as it could be, when the Lancaster crashed with the tail gunner in it, the port wing hit a tree, severed it, but spun the aircraft around, loaded fully with munitions, and it knocked the rear turret off. And with barely a scratch on his body, although he was unconscious for a short period, he awoke to find that he was alive. Joe Murphy was. And later, through the resistance, discovered that his comrade had died as a consequence of his burns. It was his survival and telling of the story to various officials that ultimately in 1946 posthumously gave the Victoria Cross to Andy Mynarski. A night of valor, a night of comradeship, but especially a night of brotherly love. No greater love has anyone than to give his life for his friend. Walking in the light, as John's letter would have us, walking in the light means loving one's fellow comrades in life, even unto death. Is this not Jesus? Is this not heart and soul of the fabric of Jesus? Giving us a vision of a love that transcends all culture, as important as our cultural traditions are. We must do, not just speak, the commands of Jesus. Jesus is our ultimate loyalty, not as person, but as transcendent love, a gift of God to the people of the world. The poem that I am closing with is an unknown source, but in Christ we have a love that can never be fathomed, a life that can never die, a righteousness that can never be tarnished, a peace that can never be understood, a rest that can never be disturbed, a joy that can never be diminished, a hope that can never be disappointed, a glory that can never be clouded, a light that can never be darkened, a purity that can never be defiled, a beauty that can never be marred, a wisdom that can never be baffled, resources that can never be exhausted. We are called to be children of the light, reflecting the light of the love of God in us as we have received that light in the Spirit of Christ. Give thanks to God, for your ultimate mission is to love God in all things, all ways, and to serve God in all times and places, in the spirit of love, which is Jesus. Let the church say, Amen.